All right. Obviously, I'm doing this video while I'm still suffering from cat hand, but you guys probably aren't going to see it for another week or so. So hopefully, by the time you see that, this is all gone. Um, but since I can't really do anything because of weather and physical constraints right now, I figured I'd try to knock out the rest of these Charles City videos. That way, when I want to put them up, all I gotta do is hit the upload button. So, in this installment, we had, and I'm gonna go ahead and say his actual name because Dean is actually fairly well known in the Oliver community. He does a lot of talks and a lot of, especially in the Charles City area, he's fairly well, he's actually very well known. And we've seen him once before in the third video I put up with him, Max, Cliff, and Dennis. He was sitting at the far end of the table. But Dean is actually the guy that has the two remaining that we know of. Well, two remaining that we know of. He wants to see, if he could ever find it, he wants to see the serial number on the third one that supposedly exists because he's not 100% sure that it's legit. But anyway, he's the one that has the two accessible, known for 325 prototypes. So we went back and this time actually got to see him. Unfortunately, at that point, the weather, they weren't really doing any groundwork or anything, and he was busy that particular day. I was happy that he took a few hours out of his day. They were trying to get manure spread and a bunch of stuff, so he could have just told us to get off the farm, but he actually talked to us for probably a couple hours or so. He actually stopped doing his work for us to come there, and so I didn't get into having him start the tractors and try to drive him around or anything like that because he had stuff to do. But this will not be our last talk with Dean because I barely scratched the surface with the amount of stories in that guy's head. He is an awesome dude, and his wife's really nice too. But anyway, so the big part of this, or the big chunk of the first part of this video, is how Dean came to own the two 325 prototypes and why they're there and how they're there and kind of the plans for him in the future. And then that dude did so much stuff. I'm not even going to try to summarize it for you. You just got to watch it because he is an awesome storyteller and he has a lot of stories to tell. So without any further ado, here's Dean Jaden.
In history, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but and again, it's my opinion, but it's shared by a lot of us in Charles City. That the new idea, White Farm merger, was more hostile takeover by New Idea. This was Allied Products' idea of we're going to join these two companies together, and they hired his name was Ron Hoddes. Bob Terry was the head of White Farm Equipment, sharp guy, and truly had White Farm as his goal, to endeavor, improve, make new products, that type of thing. And these were ready to go. All the testing was done. The one on the other side had over 10,000 hours on it out at the Phoenix test farm. This one here, it's X811 and X813, and that's the experimental numbers. That's a project number that was assigned to every tractor that was on test. That way you could document all the problems, assign it to that project number. You could document all the expense that went into that project and everything. So everything was tracked, and this one was a lab tractor. This stayed at Charles City more or less in the latter days and was on the test track, was on the dynamometer, in the dynamometer room, and used for check fitting production parts and that type of thing. So its hours were relatively low. But X813, that was put to work and it got his guts tore out of it. And it came back with a reverse gear failure. That's why it was shipped back to Charles City. But anyway, new idea took over, and basically Hottish's idea was that we're going to move the assembly line to Coldwater, and we're going to make Charles City as a machining, heat treat foundry for all of Allied products. And it was, in some ways, it was good for Charles City because we did all the machining of all the disc mowers, all the bush hog equipment, all them gearboxes. They were done in Charles City. And anything that involved pretty, I want to say, more high-tech machining was done in Charles City, and the final assembly of the tractors was done in Coldwater. But it was a deception, or a real kind of a bait and switch thing. At that time, I was working for Experimental. I was a test engineer, senior test engineer and my responsibility, main responsibility, was preparing, doing the preliminary tests on all the tractors that were going to go to the Nebraska test, and then be the representative out there, myself along with my boss. Yeah, hi. Represent White Farm Equipment at the Nebraska test lab. Make sure the results that we got out there were the same as what we had in Charles City. You know, that whole test thing is there's no surprises out there. You know, everybody knows, including John Deere International. I don't care who it is. They know, and my boss always. Gene Lockey was his name. He was the head engineering when I was a test engineer. And he said, we had some really, especially with the 160, some really unbelievable numbers on fuel economy on that thing. There was always that goal by all manufacturers. Oh, we got to break 0.4 specific fuel consumption. In other words, less than 0.4 of a pound of fuel per hour per horsepower on a dynamometer. That thing just come in and shattered that. I mean, you know, and everybody, they couldn't believe it, you know, out there in Nebraska. But when we were doing this, when we were doing the preliminary tests in Charles City, boy, it was clicking them off pretty good. And before we left for Nebraska, Gene Lockey come out and met with us. He said, now, Dean, says, I don't want any surprises out there in Nebraska. You got some pretty good numbers here. We're kind of dependent on that, you know, because those tractors were, you know, they were kind of behind everybody else because they didn't have a fancy 16-speed power shift in them or anything. It was just that same old 6-speed with an over-under in it, you know, and to me, that's all you need, and that's really all I want, because I don't want all that electronics on it, you know. Any of these tractors we farm with, we don't have one microprocessor failure on the farm here, because there aren't any, you know. But anyway, we was taking them out, but then the announcement came. They moved the assembly line, and that was the first nail in the coffin for Charles City, to Coldwater. So, well, you're still going to get, and we did have a lot of work to do. I mean, we were making them, I don't know how many of them, thousands of them disc mower gearbox assemblies, and making the whole disc mower there in Charles City, and then ship it out to Coldwater, and they'd put a little fluff on it. And it was the same with the tractors. There was time studies done after they moved the assembly line to Coldwater. 70% of the man hours that goes into building a tractor was still done in Charles City. I mean, it was just a kind of a scam in my book, you know, and it was. That's all it was. Ohio, the state of Ohio, had given White New Idea a big chunk of money to say they had an assembly line in Coldwater, and the state of Iowa didn't match it, and so, and I don't think it was ever going to happen. Even if the Iowa would have matched it, I don't think the assembly line was ever going to stay in Charles City, the final assembly. So anyway, but during that process, a decision was also made, because they couldn't assemble them out there. We're stopping all research, development, production of articulated tractors. The only thing they were going to make was front assists. You know, that was it. And so these things went into immediately, boom. You know, we couldn't even touch a wrench on them. You know, you're done. Drag them out, and at that time, Caterpillar owned the engines on all our test or our prototype mock-ups and prototype tractors. So and what they would do is they'd say, you can have the engine. When you're done with the test, we just want the engine back, and we'll tear it apart and see what's wrong, or what do we need to do changing for you, or whatever.
So you were testing them for cat, and while you're testing your own stuff, basically.
Exactly. But they were a proven motor. I mean, the 325s had the 3406 cat, the B series, the old mechanical. That's what this is, and that was a proven truck motor. But I suppose, and they knew if we went into production, they'd sell us quite a few engines, and that was kind of their bait, But anyway, so we took the motors out, shipped them back to Peoria, and there them carcasses laid out there in the weeds, and things got cannibalized off from them, especially the Phoenix tractor. It was the front tub was off from it, and I don't know where it went. And all this stuff, it's kind of like around here, you park something in the grove, pretty soon, I need this, I need that, and pretty soon you got hardly anything left.
So how many of these, because there's all sorts of rumors as to production numbers, how many, do they know how many of these, do you know how many of these were actually put together?
I think there was 4, is my understanding, and I know that's a big debate, but I do know one thing. This is X811, that's X813. There's probably a 12 out there somewhere, and there might be a 14 or a 10, but I don't, because I would get calls after after they moved engineering to Coldwater, and I didn't move with them. Then they reassigned me in the plant, or offered me the position of over factory maintenance. So I was a supervisor of the factory maintenance. I had headed up a team of about, I don't know, 20, 25 guys. Our job was to keep the plant running. In other words, fixing lathes, you name it, or unplugging toilets. It was from the whole range. And a lot of work in heat treat. But anyway, I would constantly be getting calls from when assembly was moved to Independence, Missouri, and Agco had bought it. Then that they had a 325 that had been converted into a load unit for on the test track. What they'd do is they'd take the engine out, they'd put an eddy current dynamometer in where the engine was, and then you could control your load rating on the test, for testing tractors and stuff. And they'd call me all the time. Hey, how does this work? Or we heard you had these, or you know how to work on them. And
so the test sled ended up in Independence.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. Mm-hmm. And do you have any parts? And I knew some of them guys, because some of the engineers that were in Charles City that moved to Coldwater, then moved to Independence, I felt sorry for them. Dave Kitcher was one of them. He'd always call me, Dean, you got anything like this laying around, or how does this work on it? Because it was all them guys were new, they were all trainees, kind of, and so. But so I'm sure there was a third one, and it was so elusive. See, these things, the 325s were actually developed before the 427s out in Libertyville back in the late 70s, early 80s. But I don't think they had enough test data to really justify going into production with the high horsepower and the more torque loads. So they went with the 270, which was a lot easier on the drivetrain. I mean, there's a heck of a difference in the torque load between the 3406 and the 3306. So, and I think that the 4270 was a pretty successful tractor. We built quite a few of them. But anyway, then once they got enough test data on the 325, then it was going to go into production. And then the whole plug was pulled. But anyway, I'm kind of repeating myself. So these were laying out there in the grove, out in the weeds, out, well, you know where Building 25 is there on when you're going north of the plant on, I don't know if you come out that way, on Cleveland Avenue.
Is that green one that's still standing there? But yep.
That was our test lab. that was our shop test lab. We had 2 dynamometer cells in there, and there was about a crew of about, well, there's about 15, 18 of us that worked out there. I was one of them. And we had, well, I was kind of I reported to Ivan Anderson. He was the head of test and development. He just passed away not too long ago. But I was the senior test engineer, and then we had just a lot of mechanic guys. Guys that were they weren't your typical mechanic. They were very meticulous guys, because we would do prototype builds out there and bill of material checks. What they would do is they build a prototype, okay, and we'd put that on tests and everything. But then to go into production, you'd say, okay, now we got to get this bill of material exactly right. So they would, and it was a tedious job where, okay, every bolt you would go down through the bill of materials. Okay, are there 10 bolts for that axle for that dual mount, or is there 9? And what size and everything else. So, and these guys would do that to get ready to go into production on new tractors. So we had this one ready to go, and a replacement for the 4-225, which was going to be called the 4230, which was a C. Cummins powered.
That would have been a sweet tractor.
It was nice looking. They'd done the design on the front tub. It was more like this, and it was the ones I see converted out in the field. There was one last winter, 2 winters ago. I went to the Nebraska show. God, a farmer out there had done a beautiful job on putting a C. Cummings in one, and it's been a sweet tractor. But anyway, all that stuff stopped, and then I was asked to move to Coldwater. There was a guy they hired that was going to basically take Ivan, my boss's job, Ivan Anderson. He was head of test and development. His name was Scott Clausen. He was from from International, their Case New Holland, and they threw a big carrot at him. He came to head up their test and development, and he was badgering me all the time. You got to, we want you out here. No. And out of that whole test facility in Charles City, there was only one guy that moved out there, a mechanic. That's all right. John was his name. I think he stayed with them. I don't know if he moved to Heston or to Independence even. But anyway, these things were laying out there. The other one was missing the whole front frame off from it. Engines were gone, wheels were gone. I mean, everything. It's just a pile of iron. And I contacted Scott, and I says, I know how you can maybe. And we in the farming operation here, my brother and dad and I, it was in the 80s. We were broke. We didn't have any money. Our biggest tractor we had a 4210 that would have been converted with that M&W twin turbocharger thing on it. So he was constantly fixing a 32-weight cat. It was always flying apart, because we were trying to wring way too much power out of it. And I come on this, I said, hey, there's this opportunity. Maybe I can get these things bought. We can at least make 1 out of 2. Oh, yeah. So we finally figured out a way to scrape some money together. I contacted Clausen. I said, hey, here's the deal. I'm not moving, but I know how you can turn a couple piles of scrap metal into some money for your new offices or whatever, and I will sign an affidavit that says I won't sell them for 10 years, I won't ask for any repair parts, and there'll be no warranty. And he said, I gotta think about this, we just don't do that. I said, well, that's fine, the offer stands. A couple days later, he called me back and said, I'll take your deal. So we drug him home and got some wheels on them to just be able to pull them home. Because we only had 2 miles to go, 3, and we drug them home, and that's when I got this one going first. And again, we were so broke, but we could find. The 3406s they were pre-mode engines at that time, out of our budget, we thought. So, but we found they were 16 or or 1492 or 1493. The predecessor to the 3406 is a twin cam thing, you know, pretty kind of pre-cup motor and everything. They were in semis. That's what this one had in it for a number of years, and then that flew apart, and we found an 855 Cummins and put it in. That flew apart. So then I found a really nice 3406 a number of years ago and put it. I said I want it all original, so that's what we did. And the other one had because I didn't know where that long tub went. That was gone. Nobody could find it. You know how that is. Things had a tendency to walk off the place, you know. And I don't know what would anybody want with that, but so the only thing I could find laying around was a 4270 front frame. So that one has got a 4270 motor. It's got a 3306 in it. But it's a true, and that's what I say. Before I would agree that there was, say, 6 or 7 of these built, which that's the rumors flying around, I'd want to look at the serial number tag, and I'd want to see, because every one of these, and you've probably taken a picture of this one, that's got that X number on it, and it says, you know, X811, and an X3-4325, you know. I think a lot of these that they say they got are 325s, are all they are is converted 4270s, which there isn't a lot of difference. You know, it's that front frame, radiator's obviously different, but from the back of the engine rearward, the initial 325s are almost exactly the same as a 4270. But there were long range plans where we were going to change the gear ratio in the final drive planetaries from a 5-to-1 to a 6 or a 5.5-to-1 to get everything spinning faster, and then do the final reduction out at the end, because we're on the very edge of torque limit in the power shift with this engine. You know, right? And there's some components in there. I don't know if you've ever been into one of these. There's a coupling back behind the engine. See, this is totally different from any other white tractor. There's no dry clutch in this or anything. All the clutching is done in the power shift. And so there's just a shaft that goes from the engine flywheel back into the power shift. And there's a couple couplings in there. And them are definite weak spots. If you want to lean on this thing, you'll tear that coupling out. So,
but the 4270, that was, never had any.
No,
it was pretty well matched for that one.
Yeah, it was matched for that one. Yeah. And the problem is that coupling also drives the pump that runs the power shift, you know, so it's kind of a critical coupling.
Once you're gone, you're parked.
Yeah. Well, you know, anything can be made, throw enough money at it. But, so that's the first year we got this one running, and then it took a year or so after that, because they were up at my brother's shop. At that time, this was my mother's farm, and at that time in my life, I lived up by Cowell, up by my brother. And again, the 80s kind of took that. We were just struggling. We were so broke. That's why I was gonna, you know, my goal was, I started white, and I was always gonna, oh man, I'm gonna be, you know, big high-powered engineer and everything else. And, you know, you find out, maybe that farm life isn't so bad, you know, and so my goal was to, when we bought, my first wife and I bought a farm in 1979, absolute worst time to ever buy anything like that. You know, our interest rates went through the roof, and it's not a good recipe for a successful marriage. But anyway, we finally give up on that up there. It was about 1990. Yeah, 91. My folks said, we're retiring. And once you give up on that farm up there in North Cowell, you can move down here. We'll make you a good deal on 10 acres here, and you can. And I had to go back to work. You know, I went back to work at about 80. My old boss, who you interviewed, Max.
Yep.
he hired me back. He said, he said, I hired him twice, but it was about after they moved engineering back from Libertyville, and they hired Max back. Max had quit him too. He was working for Suka, and his boss, Bob Pruney, said, you get a team put together here in Charles City. So that's when Max, he'd come to me. Well, I was working on a rental farm over here, trying to build some, I don't know, bean storage. And I still remember that. It was in the fall, and come out, Dean, what are you doing? He says, you need any extra money? I said, I'll do anything for a dime. I was desperate. So he hired me on contract for the first year or so. In 1981 or 2, they couldn't afford to have, or they couldn't show on the books that they had more employees. So that what they do, they hired me and another guy on contract, and so I just get paid, just every week. I'd go up to the front office, they'd cut me a check. How many hours did you work? It was times X amount, and no insurance, no nothing. All I got was a 1099, but then it evolved into full-time work eventually. So that's, I don't know, that's the long and the short of it.
It's amazing that because from what I heard, White, especially White, was not very good at letting stuff leave that experimental department at all.
Yeah. Well, and I remember, I think I was testing the Deutz tractors out in Nebraska, and I got a call out there, and it's behind us now, but and Dr. Leviticus, who headed up the test lab, they came out, Dean, somebody wants to talk to you on the phone. I says, we were in the middle of a test. I said, tell him I'll call him back later. No, this guy wants to talk to you really bad right now. He insists. So, okay, I go in there, and it's Swartz Rock Implement here in town. Holy smokes, they heard that I got these, and they were calling me every name but a white man, and we were going to have to fix them things all the time. I said, no, but I know the end goal. They wanted them and not me, and Steve and I've kind of buried the hatchet now. Well, saw a brand new skid loader down there. That's from him. That baler's from him. He was not happy at the time, but I've honored the wishes that I said I would, and they're not going to leave this farm. I mean, they're not for sale, and I don't. You get to be 70 plus years old, you start thinking about what am I going to. My kids, none of our kids. We have, between Len and I, we have 5 boys, and not one of them are interested in coming back here at all. They all got good jobs, and we're happy for them, but. In my will, these are going to be given to the museum, so that's...
Better give them some money to build an addition on the display room.
Well, that's the problem. And that, I'm on, McKinnis probably told you, I'm on the board of directors there. And that is our problem. We have way more bequests for tractors, and we don't have your room. And we've always said, we'd be more than willing to have your tractors if you'd bequest to us $1.5 million, $2 million or something, build a nice addition. The former, this was a number of years ago, the former plant engineer, and I worked with him pretty close. His name was Dick Nelson, and he was over layout of the plant, and where to spot machine tools. He did all the environmental work for the foundry and that type of thing. But we went on a fund drive, and we had quite a bit of money to build a wing out to the east of the office, there, that would mirror the Oliver wing. And it was going to be, Minneapolis Moline was very involved. They wanted something. They ponied up quite a bit of money, but at that time, it was going to take about $1 million, but it was $900,000 for the construction cost. And we said, well, we need that, but we also need money just set aside in a foundation to provide operations for that, And we figured another $500,000, that would give, at 5% interest, $25,000 a year to pay for At that time, it was Mary Ann's, some of her salary and that type of thing, and help and everything else. So we went out on a campaign all over the country. And there's pictures of this. They got artist renditions of the edition and all that. I don't know if you've seen them in the museum. But we hit about $750,000 in pledges. And it was like hitting a brick wall. We couldn't get, and maybe I'm not a good enough fund drive guy or something to build that edition. So that kind of went on hold. But then people have asked, well, have you ever thought about it? And I says, that door isn't locked. It's just closed for right now. If we could get somebody you need a major donor. You need somebody to say, $500,000 as long as my name's on it. That's great. Do like they do down Iowa State, the Hilton Coliseum, C.Y. Stevens. They got them names on there for a reason, because they put a lot of money in it, But for now, and I don't know, I've talked to McKenna, we've had discussions on that about maybe we should just have a off-site building to store this stuff. And she's dragging her feet on that too. She doesn't know if she wants to do that. And I said, well, we'd have it with security and everything, and if you wanted to go look at it, you left your driver's license and a credit card, and we give you the pass key, and you could go out there and the lights would come on automatically when you get in there. But I don't know, she's not real.
Well, if you need any temporary storage, I'll volunteer to look after them. As long as I can play with them every once in a while.
Kelly has volunteered. He's volunteered he's got a beautiful building out there to store things too temporarily. And that's what McKenna would rather do is, and I have to endorse her wishes, she's the director now, but is have a revolving display of, where we're every 3-4 months we're bringing in something new and taking something back to storage. But that takes a lot of work. I mean, I get involved in that when them tractors don't run, and you're moving them by hand or moving them we bring our skid loader in or the telehandler, and it's not the handiest. But
that's what a lot of people don't understand about trying to maintain a working collection, is it's a full-time job, just keeping everything.
It is. And these, for economically, I'd be better off to just knock them in the head and just go buy. I don't need anything now, big horsepower, but it's never ending. But it's kind of I don't know. I'm very, because of the involvement in the museum, and I've always been very passionate about history, especially things that revolve around the Hart Parr Oliver White Farm facility there, and there's a tremendous amount of people that put their heart and soul into that. And
there's a tremendous amount of potential there that never got tapped.
Yeah. But it's it all boils down to you can always design the nicest, most dependable tractor in the world, or anything. I don't care if it's a football or but you got to be able to economically manufacture it and sell it. And everybody said, well, Oliver's big downfall was White Farm when he took it over, White Motor, and I don't agree with that philosophy totally. But our dealer network was the critical mistake, I think, was made, and it really came to my eyes when I was first working for White Farm, fresh out of college, and it was a couple years after that. I was promoted to what they called technical service representative. There was 4 of us that worked out of the plant, where we traveled a tremendous amount of time. Things that show up out in the field of problems, and the dealer would contact his block serviceman, and the serviceman say, hey, this is showing up here too, and what's going on? And they'd bring us guys, they'd say, we need somebody out here to look at this. Something's not right. And you know, and they'd have them tore apart a lot of times, and this is what's going on. But we'd go out there and actually look the situation over, and we'd decide, we'd write up a report, and is it a quality problem, or is it something that's not designed right, and we got to go back to the drawing board, you know. And so that was we were liaisons between quality and design. But I was in a lot of dealerships, and you know, back in the 60s, early 70s, John Deere come out and said, if you're going to be a John Deere dealer, and I know I'm not a John Deere fan either, but if you're going to be a dealer for us, this is what you're going to do. And if you don't like it, you're done. Where with Oliver and Minneapolis Moline, well, you know, you got kind of a shed here, sure, we'll hang a sign on it, you know. And so they didn't have a really, they had some very good dealers, but they had some real piss ants too, you know, some real poor dealers. I'll never forget, I was down, they shipped me down once, it was on a 2135 problem, wet stacking. And it was down in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Otis Tractor, I think is the name of it. I'm not being disrespectful to him, but he was so proud. In French Cajun, that he could hardly talk any English. I couldn't talk any Cajun. But come on back to my shop, you know, just build a brand new shop. And it was a building similar to this, and it was very similar to this. It was used steel, no concrete in the floor, just grease laying all over. And here this 2135 engine laying in pieces all over the shop floor, you know. Oh, you know, it wasn't what you'd say where it was, you know, like we used to have. If you spilled oil out at the experimental, there was somebody there with a broom and a mop. You know, no floor dry was allowed, you know. But so, I truly think that was part of the demise of Oliver White. But then manufacturing left America, you know. I don't know.
Well, that's like, I was at a dealer auction and I managed to buy a bunch of factory videos from the late 80s up into the AGCO takeover, and one of them was I can't remember his name now, the guy that basically started AGCO.
Ratliff.
Yeah, Cliff Ratliff was doing one of his dealer days, and he was giving his spiel to the dealers, and he was talking about the Americans.
Yeah.
And told them that and apparently they had been the dealers had been giving him a bunch of questions of, you're canceling the Americans, we need a utility tractor to sell. And he told them that the reason that they're canceling the Americans is because since the day the first one rolled off the assembly line, that's not a single one of those tractors made them a dime. So they were canceling the Americans because they were losing money on every single one of them. Well, that's what he said. I don't know if that's true, but that's the spiel he gave them.
Well, as the old saying goes, figures don't lie, but liars figure. You know, but I can't believe that, you know, it's how you appropriate the money. I mean, you can't tell me we didn't spend a lot of money on research and development of that tractor. And hell, all the 60 is, and I got hauled to the cleaners for saying this, up to the front office, was all the 60 is a 1550 drivetrain with a Cummins motor in front of it and a little updated in the hydraulic system. That's all it is. You know, yeah, it's got a diff lock, but
yeah, I never realized I think it was Cliff was telling me yesterday, I never realized that the 60s had straight cut gears on them.
Oh yeah, they sound like an 88 going down the road, you know. This little shit will fly down the road, but they're noisy. You know, it's straight cut. They're a sliding gear transmission. And all the 80 is a 1655, you know. It's the same, everything's the same, you know. So they didn't have to spend any money on tooling and not much on development. Yeah, we had a lot of struggles with these tractors in the first, because I was involved in the development of them too. Especially the 60, the parasitic losses in them were so terrible. Couldn't get the power out of them. You know, we were, you know, Cummins said, here's the non-turbocharged four-cylinder engine, here's what it can put out. And we needed 60 to come out that PTO shaft, and we couldn't get it, you know. And well, you take all the open center hydraulics pump and all that, you know, it was a pretty high volume pump on there. And then that clutch system on the PTO is thrashing around in oil all the time.
Oh, those are still even open center?
Yeah, they're open center. It's a fake open center. Is how it is, kind of what I say. Because what they do on the low pressure side and the steering side, they got residual pressure they're running. They're always running. See, they use the same PTO clutch valve and everything as a 55 series, the exact same valve, but they're running a residual pressure where they're always got 250 to 300 psi there all the time, resistance against that pump. And then they got a flow divider for the steering, and they're, well, you can see it here. It's just I've never looked at one very close.
There are not. There's only one around us, so I've never even had a chance.
They got a gear driven or pump driven off the timing gear. That's the hydraulic pump, and they're sucking that oil all the way from the bottom. It's a common sump, sucking that oil all the way from the bottom of the transmission up here to provide, the hydraulics for this thing. And they're a handy little tractor, but they're at that time when this came out, everybody else was importing tractors and they had a shuttle in them and everything else, and this doesn't have any of that,
I guess that literally is. It's a tall shifter like a 1555.
Yeah, it's the same cast tower. All that's exactly the same.
Now, I guess I've never been around an 80. Is an 80 still got the shifter in the floor, or is it on the console?
No, it's in the floor. It's like a 2-70 wide or this 1655 Aller. It's a shorter tower because it's just a collar shift transmission. Yep. It's not the sliding gear.
I've never even been around one enough to pay attention because
they're kind of handy little.
I want one.
Mm-hmm. There's one, Swartzox. Did you see he's got one out there, 2-wheel drive 60? They just put it on Facebook. Got it traded in. I think he's asking 16. People are kind of proud of him. He's asking 16,000 for a 2-wheel drive. They didn't make very many 60 front assists. I mean, sorry, it's so dirty, but it's been sitting in the shed. And I put turbo on. It just got the whole American 80 or the BT exhaust manifold and turbo on it and stuff. And screwed up the pump a little bit. And so it made a nice little tractor. It's got some guts to it now, or before it just fall flat on its face. And this is it's like an international harvester diff lock set up. Our diff lock clutching is all out here outside to change brakes on this thing is impossible almost.
I've heard that a brake job on these things is kind of a bear.
But they run that, they got the clutch for the diff lock out here, and then they run that shaft up into to lock up the spiders. And then they got the clutch system for the front drive is right here in the drop box, right, the front bottom shaft of the drop box. We had the American series all mocked up, and with all these features on it. We built a prototype. I don't know whatever happened to that. You're gonna ask, where'd that go? I probably went to Foundry with tilt steering and a nice seat and everything. It was a really nice tractor. I remember Hoddison. His name was Simmons, Harold Simmons. He was vice president of manufacturing. Come out to the experimental department out to Cleveland. They set that thing. Oh, this is all right, but you got to carve out all these costs. So that's when we had to eliminate the tilt steering, eliminate the suspension seat. I mean, we had to take it to bare bones, and that's like I said, you can design and build a really nice tractor, but they said we can't compete on what this thing's going to cost to make to be able to sell it in the market. And I understand, we were fighting foreign labor and investment costs and everything else. We were the reason they called it the American. It was the only American-made tractor under 100 horse.
It was the last one under 100 horse too,
yeah.
Which is a real shame.
Well, that's true. So it's, but I mean, I don't know, a number of trips out to Coldwater, because we were in production and they couldn't get power out of them. And we was trying to do some things in the PTO to eliminate some parasitic losses, and we never did get it. These things were, especially the 60, was very marginal on power, on what it was advertised to put out. It was a struggle to get. I think you'd have to look at the Nebraska test, but I think they were only about 58 horse, you know. And you just couldn't, no matter how much, you know, without a turbo on it, you could back that fuel screw out and have it fall out on the ground, and all you got was more smoke and noise. You know, you didn't get any power, you know. It needed, the 4B engine, it was at its limit at what it could put out for power.
So since we were talking about Floyd County, I know a little bit of how all the parts for the corporate tractor came to end up all together again back there, but how did that
you know, and I understand you're going to talk to Wayne Wiltsey. He's the driving force behind that. A lot of that corporate tractor stuff, and well, him and Mike Verholtz, Mike was really the pusher on that, and that cab that's on the corporate tractor now, that came from his auction down there.
Oh, that's an original cab?
That's an original.
I thought that got built for it.
No. And then we had, it was all kind of, because he'd mounted it on a G1350 or something, kind of cut and torched it up, and then a good volunteer, his name's Keith Bauer, he's up by Floyd. I talked him into it, and he took that cab in, it was all pieced up and cobbled and welded and everything else, and he took it to his shop, and Keith's a neat guy. He straightened it out, got all the windows and repainted it all and everything, and then we brought it back to the museum and mounted it on the tractor. Keith's a good friend of Wayne Wiltsey. So Wayne and Keith did a lot of that background work, and you should talk to, you know, talk to Wayne about that. You're going to talk to him, aren't you?
He didn't want to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Cliff tried, but we weren't going to push that any harder. So
Wayne's you know, I don't want to talk negatively about Wayne, but I think he's really struggling. He's still in mourning over loss of Mary Ann, you know, who was the museum director, and they were pretty tight. They lived together, you know. I don't think he's fully recovered from that. And Wayne and this Keith Bauer are close friends. But Keith's neat. Keith that did the cab work, he got it. We mounted. That's when Jennifer was still working at the museum. We went out and got the cab and got it to him, and he rebuilt it all. And then he says done in his shop. And then we brought it back, and I mounted it on the tractor. And again, if you look at it, it's not ISO mounted or anything. It's just mocked up because we don't have any of the parts, but we want to have it look like it's there. Like the instrument panel and that was down at Mike Verholtz's estate sale. Mike was the one that really scrounged around and found the parts. You know, they were at a dealer in Valparaiso, Nebraska, I think it was, some of the parts. And the engine it never left Charles City. It was in somebody's barn out west of town, and so we're just, you know, you keep digging and scrounging. And when I thought, we stumbled onto another final drive assembly. Oh, I was I was about having a heart attack. I thought we'd found the holy grail. It was the CVT transmission. And it's sitting on that truck box out here. I don't know if you saw it or not, but it's just another 2-shaft, 6-speed transmission, exactly like we got on the museum here, but we're just keeping its parts. But the big difference, and I want to take that apart and maybe make a display, it's a row crop final drive. It's got bar axles on it and internal planetaries. But I think all the guts have been taken out. I haven't taken it apart yet, but I wanted to make a display. It's like a miniature. Well, it's not even close to that. It's a totally different design, but similar to the planetary system used, you know, and that was developed for White in the later years. That's. And that question come up yesterday. I was at the museum, and well, Mike Kelsom was there, and a couple other guys, and they said, "How come when they didn't use hardly any of the ideas in the corporate tractor to develop this final drive? You know, that's in the planetary tractors that we used right up to the end. I mean, AGCO used it in their power shift tractors and stuff." I said, that was before me, but I think a lot of that corporate tractor, the design work was done at APD in Torrance, California. And the design work was all done by Vince Weber and Dean Barker, who were farm boys from up here north, you know, by Osage. You know, they did a lot of that work. And so the continuity between the two projects didn't follow through because those guys weren't involved with APD at all. But that was truly a bulletproof design. That final drive was unbelievable. You know, you don't see many. Well, I have witnessed. I was called out on a couple of final drive failures, you know, when I worked at Webb.
But you really got to screw something bad.
Yeah, you got to run her on bone dry and oil, and we'd had some manufacturing problems in the early stages. I'll never forget that day. 135s had just come out, 155s. I was working for Max as a technical service rep, and he come out of his office and says, "Dean, you're on a plane as soon as you can. There's going to be a whole final drive assembly following you out in a truck to Pigeon, Michigan." I said, "Okay, what's going on?" He says, "It's bad." He said, and the story was that this dealer at Pigeon, Michigan, I forget the name of it. I got a report all written.
Was it White Pigeon?
It was clear up in the thumb area.
Nope,
Michigan.
not White Pigeon.
This was right up at the top. Oh, Lake Michigan was totally around you. It's called Pigeon, Michigan. Damn Implement, I think, is the name of the dealer. They got their first 235 and they had it at the 4th of July parade. And he said he was driving down the street. All at once it jerked and shuddered a little bit. He kept driving. Oh, it's kerboom! And it blew out the whole bottom end of the planetary assembly. Dumped 40-gallon oil on Main Street, locked up. They had to drag it off the street. And here they sent me out there. He says, "You got to calm the waters. This is not good." And what we found out in manufacturing, some of the early planet carriers were not shot peened correctly, and so they were stress relieved. And when they got all the planet carrier pins all bored in there and everything, they'd crack, and one of them pieces would come around and then get between the sun gear and the planet gear. Well, guess what?
Just jack it right apart.
It had to. There was no place for it to go, and it blew out the whole bottom end of that final drive.
That's real good advertising.
Oh man!
Right in front of God and everybody.
Yeah. I showed up there, and "Hi, I'm Dean Jayden from Charles City, and I'm here to help you." That dealer called me every name but a white man, I think, for quite a while. We spent over a week there, tore the whole final drive off from the tractor, and then the truck showed up and got that total right off the assembly line. Whole brand new final drive assembly. I don't know if he sold another 135 or not, but they were just an unbelievably tough final drive. You just don't hear the failures.
Well, them 135s and 155 overall, they were just, those were probably the pinnacle of the best tractors to ever roll off that line.
Yeah, I would agree with you at the time. It'd been nice if we'd had a B and C series Cummins motor at that time. That was, that was but our numbers were so low then. But see that whole, and that's what I say about, very bad mouth white motor, but the tooling that was required to make that final drive assembly and do all the heat treating and everything and cutting them gears was a tremendous investment, and White Motor ponied up with the money somehow. It was about, I think it was around $15 million at that time for, there was some dedicated boring machines and the heat treating of that internal ring gear and cutting the ring gear. There was a lot of machines imported from Germany, or Fellows gear shavers that cut that we could cut the Sun gears and the Planet gears, but that internal ring gear, that was a whole nother ball game for us. We'd never done that. We was always making bull gears, and then the ring gear and pinion, that was bought from Fairfield, but that was a major investment too, They were pretty good tractor. Well, the 135, and I know guys that think them 2 150s were God's answer to everything. They were a pain for us. They were not. We had engine problems with them. We had not too much drivetrain problems, but air conditioning problems. It was just brought into production way too fast. And should have never used that fatty. But I know why. See, they'd moved that production of the 585 motor. Well, all the 800, the 585, the 605, and the 504 and the 425 from Hopkins, Minnesota, down to Charles City. We had to get that thing going. That was a major thing, getting all that running. And then here we had all this justification, had all this money spent on moving that and getting that tooling running and everything. We had to make motors, that came from the top. You're going to make Minneapolis Moline motors, and you're going to use them somewhere. Well, guess what? But my colleague, he was there was the 4 of us. There were tech service reps. There was myself. Then there was a guy from Minneapolis Moline. His name was Les Cudel. He knew everything about a G1000 Vista or anything else, but if you asked him anything on a 135 or a 105, his famous words, "I got just the man for you." You knew that phone call was coming your way when he said that, because he'd always pass on it. And then there was Ray Hendricks, who was a genius, and he's over here, just a couple of miles. He went to work for Caterpillar after White, but he was a genius on the 55 series hydraulic system and the over-unders. He just really was I really liked him. Odd, but he was. And then there was Bill Smerling, and he was a guy, and when I was there, he was probably in his late 50s. And he was in charge of Fiats and all that stuff. But then he also had to do, all of us had to share responsibility on Charles C. manufacturing stuff. His summary of of course, we'd had the G1355, and then we come out with the 2150, and he said, "Same old whore with a new skirt is all that is." Now, don't publish this stuff. That's, he didn't think much of that tractor. None of us did, but it served a purpose. There was a lot of low oil Moline customers and dealers that wanted that 585 motor, or that, a Moline motor, so that's what they got. They always said, and this Bill Smerling did say, you remember that USAC showdown?
Yep.
you know.
I've got a banner from it.
Oh, okay. Well, he was down there at Cordele, Oklahoma, or Georgia. They called it the Cordele Ordeal. And where they was testing them, the 2255 against everything else, and he said, good thing they didn't bring a G1355 down there. He just said, other than not starting, he says it'd have showed them all up, because it was such a well-balanced tractor, and they could pull. I mean, you know.
Well, that was what Moline always had. They could if you could get enough traction, I swear it'd stop the rotation of the earth.
They were, you know, it was just, you know, where the 2255 was short wheelbase, and oh God, we had one for a long time. They just wear you out running one all day. I mean, they just, between all the noise and the vibration and the jerking and jumping around, you know. But
Cliff said you had an experimental 22.
yeah, I wish I had that back. Oh, I wish I had that back. And again, we were out of money. I mean, yeah, I bought that. It's experimental.
Was yours experimental enough that it didn't have the hole in the frame yet for the oil filters, or was it past that point?
It was past that point. It was the very first one of the 3208.
Gotcha.
First one with the 3208, and it was a Phoenix tractor, just beat to pieces. But it was the reason I think it was tested out there, not only because it was a 3208, it had the white cab on it. It had that diamond shape.
Oh, that would have been different.
Yeah, there was none around like that. You know, this is before they had.
You say that. There, in one of, I think it's a full line catalog. I can't remember what year. It was an Oliver one, so it had to have been a 73 or a 74 full line catalog. There is a picture in one of the plow section.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
With a planetary rear end tractor with a white cab.
Yeah.
I wonder if it was that tractor.
23 134s on. We dueled it up, and oh man, we had a big. This is before we bought that 4210. And it was pulling a, I don't know, 25, 30 foot cultivator.
Front wheel assist or two wheel drive?
Two wheel drive. We had her weighted down to the nth degree, you know. But what happened is it busted the axle mount bolts off of, you know, you're pulling it so hard all the time.
Flexing
that frame, broke them bolts, and it just trashed everything in the inside, didn't we? And I don't know if you know that Brian Buchholz, that's a big tractor, the little kitty tractor puller.
Name sounds familiar.
Yeah, down here by Waverly. They were looking for a 2255 front frame and all that. We got this the deal for you. So we took the transmission case off and sold him everything from the front, you know, the front tub bolts ahead, and he made that pulling tractor. That's another sad story. I was down to his place the other day. I got a 2180 that I'm fixing up now, and they were two brothers. The one is 50 years old, the younger one has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and it's just sad what's going on there. And they're pulling tractor. They hope to get it running again this year. I don't know. That's all for a different story, totally different. But yeah, but we were, I wish I had that tractor. And brother Larry, my brother's 10 years older than me, and he mentioned it the other day. God, I wish we had that 2255 back. We always had that on a 4-inch chopper. I pulled a 3-row John Deere 3960 4-inch chopper, because we chopped a lot of silage. He had a cattle feeding operation. This one wasn't cattle feeding. We did some custom chopping. Man, that thing could fill chopper boxes in a hurry. You could stand all the racket.
This kind of made it sound like you guys kind of had a fair number of experimental stuff come through here. Well, fair number.
I remember when they were developing the 4, and I was still in high school, right out here in this field, they were plowing with they call it the low profile. It was an Oliver styled 4150.
Oh, they had the one with the green hood and the white wheels and stuff out here? Oh, that would have been cool.
Yeah.
We found a picture of that, and Dad always wanted to find a 4150 and strip all the crap off of it and make it and mock that one up just because it looked cool.
They made a good, my closest friend from grade school. His dad was the model builder. His name was Ken Jacobson at the plant there. He made models, full-scale models out of plywood and styrofoam and everything else. He said he always remembered when they were mocking up a they called it a low pro, and it was going to be for marketing, to use for marketing shots and that type of thing. Spent over almost a year on it, building it all up, getting it all painted up real pretty. It was an Oliver style one, you know, just like the one you see the pictures of. He said Kidder and Bunky Knutson on the stylist showed up at the plant here. They looked at that and they said, we ain't gonna put up with that kind of a style. He said, take that and chop it up and throw it in a dumpster. He said he just bawled his eyes out. He worked so long on it. And that's when Bunky Knutson had retained that, the stylist that did the Mustang and the Lincoln, Shinoda. And that's when they come up with this silver and the stripes and all that stuff. That paid for a lot of my trips, so I went on more dang service calls than them 4150s. Steering and you name it.
I got one back home that just about fell in half chisel plowing last week because the center kingpin fell down.
I was down in the, the bayou country down there in Louisiana, in rice paddies, where the center hinge literally, it was in two pieces, the tractor was. It ripped everything apart. You know, that articulation hinge, they busted all the stops off from it and everything, you know, and then it would just literally, and they just hired help, just kept driving it until it literally, and they had me down there in that. Oh, what a mess. The thing had been wallering around in mud its whole life, you know. Never seen a grease gun.
Dean had to go move a tractor so a feed truck could get through, but so real quick, she looks a little better than last time. He's been working on a little bit of sheet metal work, and panels are painted. It's got new decals on it, and the one with the baby nose on it hasn't changed a whole lot, but we're gonna get out of his hair here shortly because he's got manure spread while the weather's decent. But I wanted to make it back and get a better story on these, and we got a little bit of a, he says that the best guy to talk to on the corporate tractor is one that didn't want to talk this go around, but Cliff's gonna keep working on him for me, so hopefully on the next go around we can actually talk to him. Wayne Wiltsey. Dad actually used to work with one of his cousins, I think. But anyhow, we're gonna say our goodbyes to Dean and move on to the next person. But anyhow, that's it for this one, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.